All right, we are recording and getting started here. Again, thank you everyone for joining us on this Monday evening. We're here to review and talk through the MBYLL Return to Play Support Guide. My name is Kevin Barney, the Director of Sales and Marketing for Mass Bay Youth Lacrosse, and just want to, again, a couple of quick things. We'll use the Q&A function down at the bottom to ask questions. I will monitor that throughout our little presentation. I'll take a break in between to review some questions, and then at the end we'll have the panelists we'll direct the different questions to them to answer towards the end, but feel free to ask them in there at any time from that. And so kind of to begin, since this pandemic really began to impact our area, the focus of MBYLL really became even more focused on our mission, which is just to provide opportunities for kids to play youth lacrosse. We're not a tournament or championship focused league, so we're focused on providing opportunities for more kids to play in a safe and learning environment. And really that's where we're back to right now. Last week, the state released its standards for organized youth sports to begin to return to play as part of phase 2 of the governor's reopening plan. And what that means for youth lacrosse in a nutshell is local, small group, non-contact practices only. The state standards, its must-dos and its suggestions to do in order to host these practices are very specific. And while they provide that first step to playing lacrosse that we've all been looking for, we know that it brings challenges to our volunteer-run town programs to implement. And while there's a strong interest in returning to play from some, we also know that many parents, have concerns and reservations of when to allow their kids to get back out onto the fields with other kids to play lacrosse and all sports. And really, that's why we're here tonight, to discuss these standards and challenges, the concerns on how to in the how-to for those who are interested and able to create lacrosse, safe lacrosse opportunities. So MBYLL, we've taken these standards and recommendations from the state of Massachusetts, from our sports governing body, U.S. Lacrosse, from our insurance provider, Sadler Sports, and from other highly regarded national organizations like the Aspen Institute, to create our Return to Play Support Guide. Our guide covers our MBYLL insurance for town programs, coaches, and players. It shares links to those other guides and information from those organizations, and it outlines the 26 points of emphasis for town programs to follow to host lacrosse practices. So joining me to discuss is Jim Dalton, who's the president of the MBYLL Board of Directors. Jim is a longtime youth lacrosse coach from Chelmsford. He's served on the Chelmsford Youth Lacrosse Board as a coaching director and treasurer. And Jim has also served the MBYLL as an assistant director in the Northwest region. He's been the director of the Northwest region, and last fall was voted in as president of Mass Bay Youth Lacrosse League. We also have from the board of directors, Dave Johns, who's the director of coaching education, and Dave is from North Andover. And we also have Bill Yucatonis, who is the president of Foxborough Youth Lacrosse. And we felt it was very important to bring on a person who's a town leader and really looking at how to implement these standards and looking at really boots on the field and returning to play. So we're going to start. I am actually going to just share on my screen the sorry, one second here. I'm going to pull up our return to play document. All right, that's not working. All right, I'll pull that back up in a second here. But we're gonna, start with a guide by talking about the MBYLL insurance policy for town programs, coaches, and players that many have been asking about as the talk of returning to play has started. So I'm gonna start with Jim Dalton. If you could kind of tell everyone the current state of the MBYLL insurance policy and summarize, what insurance means and what our policy means to our town programs, our coaches, our players, especially, during this time of, dealing with COVID-19.
Sure. Well, our insurance is through Sadler Sports Insurance. I believe the underwriter is K&K. We had, going back to when we canceled the regular season, we had a few towns who kind of wondered why we didn't just cancel insurance and do all the money back. And I will say that we had an overwhelming number of towns who wanted to have a chance to play again, get kids out on fields, even if it wasn't for a formal season in games. And our board unanimously decided to continue our insurance. And at this stage, I think we're glad that we did, because even if a town decides not to do anything, they have the option to do something now, do something in the summer, do something in the fall, do something in the winter. Our insurance will cover it until we start to sign up for next year. And so that means your players are covered for general liability, and your coaches, as long as they signed up and went through MBYLL as a coach. And hopefully if we get to any games, and that could be possible in phase 3, we'll have to wait and see. We need to also make sure coaches went through their certification. We think that most did, but we know there are a number who didn't, and that's an issue we're gonna have to get to in the future. But that's important to insurance, and Dave will talk a little bit about that as well. So I wanted to say that John Sadler, who runs the Sadler Company, is the president, and he is also a lawyer, so he's been great to consult with. We've done conference calls with him. I've talked to him a number of times. We don't have to pay more for that. It's part of our insurance coverage. We're one of his bigger accounts. And so we feel like we get good advice from him, particularly around liability. There's a lot of issues to do with health that the state is taking care of in their plan. But the liability that you have to worry about as a town director, and the coaches in the towns who have to follow these things and make sure they're enforced, the guidelines from the state, are going to be very important. We'll talk more about that as we go through this. But we have current insurance for liability. It doesn't cover you, though, if you're negligent, right? And if you're not following the state plan, and I say every town director and coach should read this plan, particularly the details where it says must. And I'm talking about the state plan from the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs. I was a member of the committee for youth sports, so we had a say in this. We had input that we gave specifically from lacrosse, as well as the other youth sports in Massachusetts, hockey, soccer, et cetera, into this program. And we feel like the governor did listen, although all of his health experts, really the bottom line, they had to say in what this plan was going to say. So you have insurance, you have general liability, you're going to be able to print your binder if your town requires that, and pretty much every town does. So that has stayed in effect, and you can do that again outside of this season for all of your players and your coaches as well. And while I'm on it, I'll just throw in for town directors that you should strongly consider directors and officers insurance for your board and yourselves. We did that in Chelmsford a number of years ago. We do it for the MBYLL board, and that covers you for liabilities within the board that could happen in your towns. It's important to have. It's not part of this plan that we have now. You have to do that on your own as a board, and there are a number of companies who do that as well. If you want more information about that, you can reach out to us at MBYLL at support. Kevin as well can be helpful to that, and we can give you some thoughts. We don't back any certain company for that, certainly, but there are different companies who offer that. I'll end there, Kevin.
Great, thank you. I know you'd mentioned in there talking about coaches and insurance. I want to bring on Dave Johns to talk a little bit about an overview of how MBYLL continued our coach education as everything began to shut down, and what that, how that process went, what that means for our coaches in particular right now with their coaching badges, and then, a little bit about any that are getting back out there for practices, really what coaches should be thinking about during this time. And I'll unmute you here, Dave. You're muted.
Yeah.
There you
Okay,
go.
so I don't really know the full audience out there tonight. I think we invited parents and coaches and town directors. So I may speak a little generally about things that some people may have not heard before and some people may know very well. Um, when I started in this position, it was mandated that we change the coaching education, revamp it totally from what it was to what it has morphed into today, which I think is a more comprehensive program that offers our coaches much better training than they had 7-8 years ago. Um, and what we require is an in-person training every 2 years in order to be a certified coach within our program. Also this year we instituted that every coach had to register with us and would have to have a badge on the sideline. So we have 2 badges. One says registered, one says certified. When the COVID hit, we had just finished our second in-person clinic at St. John's Prep, and we were the last folks to even have an event there. I think they closed the place a day after we were there, and luckily, we do have great partners in Trilogy Lacrosse and a couple of other folks that we were able to put together some very good online seminars that we substituted in to allow coaches to become certified and get their badges. This was a one-time thing. It hopefully won't happen again because we really feel that the in-person thing is just a much more effective thing to do. But all of those, Kevin, I don't know the exact number. If you can tell me how many online clinics we ran.
Well, yeah, we had the 2 for the certification. We had 2 different levels
Right.
of it, and
Right.
then we also, we offered. We had about 14 different online coaching topics that we covered over
Right.
about a month
Right.
period.
Yeah, I just don't know. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, we did do other topics to get coaches and actually some of the kids and parents were invited to enjoy some of what Trilogy had to offer. So that being said, all of anybody that did complete their requirements for their certification badge, those have all gone out. You should have received them by now. If you haven't, get in touch with me, get in touch with Kevin, let me know, and we'll look into it and make sure you get it, as well as anybody registered. But those are all out there. They've been mailed. Anybody should have those. A couple did come back. I don't know, something funky with our system. One guy came back, his address was 33. No street address, no nothing. But that's just printed out of our registration system. So I don't know what went wrong there, but we'll get that corrected and get that out to him. So going forward from that, once you guys decide that you are going to do things, what I think I'd highly recommend maybe is to go back to our basic training coaching video that we require everybody to take once before they start to coach, and just look at that for some advice. The biggest thing there is you guys have to have a practice plan when you show up at the field. Depending on how many kids you're going to have there, let's say you have 2 groups of 10, or two groups of 9 and 2 coaches. And with the guidelines, they have to be Group A and Group B. There's no mixing and matching, no coach switching. So the coaches, you guys all have to get together. You all have to have the same plan. We have to say, okay, 10 minutes we're doing this, 10 minutes we're doing this, 10 minutes, and and everybody, okay, 10 minutes, next drill, next this. And who knows who you're going to get if you run a sign up. You may be pleasantly surprised that everybody and their brother wants to come down and and do this. Or on the other end of the spectrum, you may get, what if you only get 5 kids, 6 kids, but they're, they may be 5 kids that are first timers, which who knows what they are. I mean, some of them may turn out to be the town stud someday, but you know, work with them, and some kids may find it, and some parents may find it that, hey, this is an opportunity that maybe you're going to go down and get some attention that you wouldn't get in a regular time. And so embrace that fact, but make sure that when you're going into this, that you have a plan that, okay, we're showing up at the field. Again, as we say in our guidelines, maybe you have a designated person that's putting this plan together. Is somebody meeting people at cars? Okay, are you sending out an email beforehand? Okay, Johnny's in A, Louis in B. As you get up to the field, we'll have a sign up there. Coach Joe is A, Coach Sal is B. Go to their place. That's where you are. And then the biggest thing is make sure that you are communicating with the parents. That I realize that parents too are in this situation, that they'd like to be out, and this may be a great opportunity for them to be dropping the kids off and getting an hour and a half free to go do what they want to do, kids free. So I mean, not that that isn't what it is sometimes in the regular season too, but whatever. And if there's parents online, I'm sorry, but I did say that.
Dave,
Yeah, go
Jim,
ahead, Jim.
can I hop in for just a second?
Yep.
Because we're getting a bunch of questions fired at us while you were talking about some of the things. And I just want to say a couple of quick things. One is that we know that there's a lot of towns that are not, they're going to want to shut things down, and that's okay. That's understandable. We know that there's parents who are going to be afraid and not have the kids do this. That's understandable. All those things could happen. But certainly with phase 2 opening up, we feel an obligation to let people know how they have to do it if they're going to attempt to do it, and to do it as safely as possible. I want to make some clarifications around the insurance, because I'm getting questions about the waiver, about the insurance. The waiver is just for you. The waiver doesn't do anything. And I'm going back, I'm not a lawyer, but I'm going back to my 2 years of business law. And a waiver, all that does for you is help to make people aware of what you're doing and saying. It does not take away any liability at all. Waivers aren't really worth the paper they're written on, to be honest with you. They're more for notification and communication. In a court of law, they'll always look at negligence. This policy, this insurance policy, does not cover any of this, nor is there a policy for any of this. The policy that you have through Sadler is simply for general liability. It's secondary coverage, which is a whole, I could talk for an hour on secondary coverage, and I'm not an expert in it, but you just have to understand that this policy is a general liability secondary insurance policy that your town will need from you to have a waiver. There's no protection from doing this thing with COVID-19 from this policy. So I don't want anyone to misunderstand what we're talking about with the insurance, like it's going to cover you. The best coverage you can have is to follow this plan to a T if you're going to take this on. And there is some amount of risk, but I think are you doing things reasonable? Are you making things as safe as possible? And as John Sadler said to us, it's kind of hard to really determine, particularly in a court of law, exactly where someone picks up COVID-19. And not that we want anyone to do that, but there's a lot of doubt around this, and there's a lot of things he couldn't answer. He also said policies in the future will have a COVID-19, or it'll be more general around a virus like this. They'll have an exception. So to get insurance that would cover you for getting sued because someone gets COVID-19, they may have policies like that in the future. None exist now, and they'll be very, very expensive. So please don't think that this takes care of any of those things. We're just saying we kept the general liability that most towns require of any sports organization to use their facilities in case someone doesn't have insurance and gets injured. So it really doesn't have to do with this health and safety part about sickness. Okay? Sorry, Dave.
No problem. So I guess, I mean, I don't know, you know, again, I think the levels that you're going to have there, I mean, you're going to want to organize different things for different, if you've got a group of 1-2s there, you know, it's going to be difficult to be, you know, have this group of 9 here, this group of 9 there, and making sure that, no, you can't go over there. You know, kids just want to go over and, you know, congregate with their buddy from second grade class who maybe they haven't seen in ages, and this is the first time out they're going to see. So you're going to run into that, a lot of that. And all I can say is just, you know, as in our regular time, have a practice plan. Have a plan when you're arriving at that field and those kids show up at that field. You've got 60 minutes, 90 minutes. I mean, I'd advise 60 minutes. I mean, to run through these things, get it done. You know, and it's not going to be the most thrilling time, probably. You know, by 45 minutes, these kids are probably going to be, hey, when are we going to do the scrimmage? When are we going to do that? You know, so I mean, have some games, have some competitive things ready to go that you know, you can engage them in. But beyond that, I don't know. It's we're all in the same boat, and you know, if anybody has any suggestions to offer out there, to offer up to the group about what you're thinking, decide. So, well, yeah, this isn't this is going to be tough. We're all volunteers, and you know, but don't forget, I mean, there's, you know, everybody's out there. There's some kids. I know one of the guys in my region, he worked his tail off trying to get 1s and 2s signed up to make sure that he was kind of filling out his program, because 1s and 2s were a weakness for him this year, and he got them, and he was, you know, he worked it and he has it, and then, you know, then the crap hit the fan, and all he wants is an opportunity to make sure these kids get a stick in their hand once or twice, get the opportunity to see if they like the game. And I mean, if he has, you know, I think he had somewhere in the mid-teens. If 10 of those kids show up at the field and 5 of those kids pan out as somebody who loves the game and wants to continue on, great for him. But I mean, this is an opportunity for him to make that happen, and you know, I'm sure he will. So, you know, again, everybody's got their own decisions to make and do, but it's a tough time.
Dave, it's Jim again. I just want to jump in and hit a couple of questions here to clarify things, because the people are listening, but they're asking a lot of questions, so I want to stay up with this. In being on this committee for the governor's office, we went through a lot of these scenarios, so I do have some answers. When you go to a practice, the group of 10, they call it a cohort, right? It includes however many coaches and players. That's the group. That group starts together, stays together, cannot change. Coaches can't go between groups. If you have one coach with a group of 9, it's 10 total, including the coaches. That's the number. And 20 feet in between groups of 10 you have to have. So one coach has to stay with one group from the beginning of the practice to the end, and all the kids have to stay with that. So you can't pull goalies out. You can't do those things. If you want one coach to work with a goalie, that's one of your groups. You can do that, right? But you can't have them jump in and out. You just can't do that. So you're going to have to, it's going to be tough. I'll just say that. Now, from one practice to the next, kids can switch groups and coaches can switch groups. But again, once a practice starts until it's over, it's got to be that same group of 10. They did not make a distinction between whether it's the group from one practice to the next, okay? Multi-age practices, there's no designation on that. You can do that, but again, it's got to follow the group of 10, right? That includes the coach, okay? And then anything with MBA rules or insurance would be if we combine groups. No, not at all that I can see or are aware of, okay?
Especially with being non-contact, you know, I mean, that is a big point of this. And yeah, seeing some of these questions too on, it's going to be challenging if you can't do contact. Yeah, this is going to be, you know, it's going to be back to basics. And, you know, for a little while, we don't know how long phase 2, the first phase was 3 weeks. This one's going to be a minimum of 3 weeks. It could just be 3, and then we could move on to more. It could be, longer than that. But, but we also have to remember, we've talked about too, a lot of kids, I've seen a lot of stuff on Instagram and things of kids in their backyard doing lots of drills, but then there's a whole nother set of kids who haven't had that opportunity, who might not have had the stick in their hands at, that much or at all in the last couple months. So, to bring some of those kids out just to do some passing and, maybe some shooting drills, some ground ball things on their own. That's kind of what we're going to be talking about, I believe. And we're going to talk more about that as, the board and regions and, within different towns of how can we come up with, as many fun things and drills to do, over these next couple weeks as well. But,
and maybe just to put in here, because I'm thinking of Brendan Keenan had just asked, man, it's so tough. I can't think how to run practice with rules of 6 feet apart, not within 6 feet. Is that the guidance? So the guidance is 6 feet. Being reasonable. No one's going to have the yardstick out all the time, but it's supposed to be non-contact. I think what you're going to really want to do in the towns is if I'm running this, I'm using a ton. If I'm on grass, I'm using field paint. I'm going to use squares and circles. I'm going to make them. If not, I'm going to use cones, tons of cones, different color cones. So you can think of the drills that you do as a coach now, where you move from box to box when you're teaching, and you can set up things like that. So there are a number of drills you can do where kids can stay 6 feet apart, particularly if we're not playing contact or having the defenders stay close. There's a lot of both defensive and offensive drills where they have to keep their spacing. So there are things to do, but it is tough. It just is.
So I think this is kind of a good segment. And first of all, up on the screen, on our guide, we do have those, the 4 main links of the groups that we've been talking with and used. And, I know, from the state of Massachusetts, U.S. Lacrosse, Sadler Sports, and the Aspen Institute. And a lot of these organizations are now trying to come up with, along with what we're going to do, okay, now here's the rules. What, here's some ideas on what to do. With that, that's what I think a good opportunity to bring Bill Yucatonis from Foxborough in and hear what town leaders are thinking, before we go maybe into all the details of the guidelines and regulations. Bill, love to hear what your thoughts from Foxborough on the possibility of starting up, especially as this weekend would have been the end of our regular season. So we're going to be kind of outside our normal time frame of the season. Schooling at home is coming to an end, summer plans and being a volunteer organization.
Like I said to you earlier, we're just going to run into the last week of the season and play games, right? That's the right way to do it. I wish. I think, listen, the reality is we're all in this together and we're all trying to figure out, what these rules are and how we create a safe experience. And I think that the balance from a town perspective, and I don't want to speak for all towns, but I think, we probably philosophically share this. I think, firstly, there's an obligation to some sense to figure this out for the kids, right? I mean, these players, our players, have missed out on a season. They've missed out on a season that could have been their last season as an 8th grader or their first season, and right. So how do we provide something for them to keep a stick in their hand? And unlike other sports, lacrosse, particularly in this area, may not come natural for all families and all kids. And so, again, out of sight, out of mind, how do we provide an opportunity to play? And so, I think as we look at the rules, the balance is, obligation to the kids and at what cost from a program perspective can we pull this off? And, the cost perspective, isn't always financial. It's the volunteer overhead. We're all volunteers. These programs are all nonprofits. And, we barely in the traditional spring season have enough coaches to really develop the players the right way. And so when you look at rules under these new guidelines where you've got 10 feet apart and, one coach per cohort or potentially a couple, depending on how you mix it up, you've now, multiplied your overhead. And so, how do you figure this out? I think the way I look at it, and I've talked to some area coordinators and directors, is, I think if there's a subset of interest from the town and there's a subset of coaches that can figure this out, I think the question is, again, within safety guidelines, how do we progress the next steps? And so, if you look at the rules that have been put forward in this phase, some of it's common sense, right? Some of it's common sense that we live with, just every day under this new normal as far as spacing and masks and hygiene and again, doing the right thing there. I think there's some things around signage at fields, and again, that comes at a cost. And I reached out to our fields coordinator at the town level to figure out from a Board of Health standpoint and so forth what requirements we have or what signage they're going to put up. And the answer is we don't have any here. It's on your own. And so again, from a town perspective, from a program perspective, we've got to take on that burden to do that. And so I don't have a good answer other than I think we're going to try to figure it out. And I don't know if we're going to be able to do it alone. I think, in Foxborough, we're not the largest town. We're not the smallest town as far as players. We've got a good complexion of players at each age group. But quite honestly, when I send a survey this week to figure out, who might be interested, my sense is I'm not going to get a full response for whatever the reasons are. And so the question is, can we pull something off and is it worth the risk? So I think, to answer your question directly, I think it's how do we balance the rules at the cost, at the next steps, and do we merge with other towns? Do we create commingled leagues or commingled practices? And I think the answer is everything goes. But I think as a town, we've got to figure out how to do that to get kids back on the field safely when appropriate. And I don't know if this phase is the right phase or not, honestly. I think this phase for some age groups, we might be able to do something. But I think Dave was talking about it before, your 1-2 player, which is first, second grade, in the typical behaviors, right or wrong, that you get in practices is very different than a 7th, 8th grader. And it's different from boys and different from girls, right? And so, after these new guidelines, how the heck do you figure that out? In Foxborough, we have a combined boys and girls program. I know we're talking about the boys here for this call, but we operate under that same philosophy. And so I've got to figure out how to get lacrosse back on the field for everybody in that safe way. So I don't know. I don't know if this is the right phase, but I've got to trust leadership here that we've got the right insurance in place. I've got to trust that our coaches are going to do the right thing and abide by some of these common sense guidelines here. And at the end of the day, it's a cooperation with parents and players and our volunteer coaches to see if we can slap some semblance of a mini season together, even if it's just weekly clinics or something to keep in play.
No, great, thank you. I think going back, because seeing some of the questions, especially on the legal side, it is the most challenging. And we've had our conversations with the insurance provider, and the hardest part, I think, from top to bottom, is that this is brand new for everyone, from insurance to the legal side to organizations. As Jim talked about, it really comes down to negligence is what's going to get someone in trouble. And what's that line of negligence? There's all these guidelines, and even the state of, from signage to, again, talking about having 6 feet, were you 6 feet or not? And Jim, correct me, if you feel I overstep at all, but the guidelines are there obviously to keep everyone safe. Where the negligence comes in is where you really go against something. There is that common sense of, hey, you're going out and participating in a sport. There is a minimal risk, and that's kind of what the waiver is talking about, that there is some assumption of risk, and that's what that's helping to say that you've shared that. But as long as you've, in general, followed the guidelines from our, U.S. lacrosse and from the state and from your local of, and they said, yes, you can go out and play, and, as long as you're keeping kids apart and that's happening, there's very little negligence that's going to, liability is going to happen if someone, were happen to get sick if you were following everything. It's not, that's what we're hearing from our insurance, provider. So people want to, put the stringest rules on there to make sure that, hey, this is what it's going to take. And, as long as everyone's doing their best, as long as, you're not allowing kids to run free and playing a game with 50 kids out there, those are the things that are going to get people in trouble. Following these basic rules and doing your best at it, there is an inherent risk, and that's kind of what is being talked about, and that's going to be assumed by people, especially when they sign the waiver, that hey, you knew there was an inherent risk by being out in public. Unfortunately, these days.
I think the balance, Kevin, not to interrupt you, is again from a town perspective, it's common sense. And I think if we spent a half an hour 3 months ago looking at the insurance policy and all the liabilities that come along with it and the common sense guidelines you got to follow, we'd have a lot of other, similar questions raised, right? I mean, insurance, it's an edge case. It covers a lot of things. And again, you've got to do your best to abide by it. So I'm not saying I'm not worried from a town perspective, but I think there's a framework here that makes sense. I think it's followable. The question is can a town truly activate it, and at what cost?
Yep. Well, that's what I kind of want to go in next with you, Bill, a little bit is, I'm scrolling down through, we came up with 26 points, which is a lot. But, kind of when you talk about on the common sense side, is there anything on there that, either stands out as challenging or, hey, yes, that's, here's most important to you and feeling what you guys you're going to try to do, or how are you going to attack that? Like you said, maybe is it a smaller group, is it a certain age group to almost kind of test run it with, and then before, just trying to get your whole program out there?
Yeah, I'm not sure about the test run yet. We're still trying to figure that out. But I think the challenge that I'm struggling with is the cohort, the 10 player approach, with a coach, and how do we provide the right level of coaching for those 9 other players, and do we have enough, right? Do we have enough coaches? Do we have that right, enough ratio of coaches to players to create enough cohorts across the groups? And inherently, that's where the test may roll out, where we just get interest in a few age groups and it just kind of works itself through, not sure yet. And I think that's where, from a parent's perspective, we need that flexibility. And, you may hear something in your towns where, geez, how come the 5-6 boys are out playing, but the 3-4s are not? Are you ignoring us? And the answer is, well, no, not ignoring you. It's just, we couldn't figure out the ratio, right? For whatever the logistical reasons were. Coaches have their own lives, and hopefully they haven't been impacted personally or professionally by this, but we're all impacted in some way. And so to try to get their commitment now off season to go out and do it and get that enough ratio, I don't know how everybody's going to figure that out. And that's why I think, town programs need to be open-minded to kind of, drop the town lines in some case, and maybe cross over and merge programs just to figure it out, whether it's coaches or whatnot. And we've got to trust Dave's program from a coach's side. I think it's good quality education, and from a Foxborough standpoint, if I've got a Mansfield coach, coaching some of my kids, or a KP coach or whomever, I've got to trust that they've got the right experience to do so. And I think, again, that's how we're all going to be able to figure that out. But we're one community. And so I think, get the list of other things around hygienes and masks and whatever, are masks a pain? Sure. Are masks a pain? As you're trying to coach? Absolutely. I think that's going to be a challenge, right? I mean, some kids, the way that you're able to communicate them now through a mask in a play in motion, you're going to have some audible challenges here to come across and to communicate effectively. But I think there's ways to do it. And from a player side, I know some of the club programs are equipping kids with these new Cascade shields that have been developed. And I think, town programs can't afford to do that. But I think those are things that parents may want to look into as if you are thinking about returning to play to the field, maybe picking up one of those face covers that goes right over your face mask as just an added safety. So yeah, I think it's really the cohort piece that's the challenge, and how we really figure out that numbers to provide enough quality and effort to make it work. And that's where I'm going to struggle. I saw a question around surveys, and that is something I haven't sent one yet, but I'm doing one in Google form. Google has a free one for any of you coaches out there. You can create one pretty straightforward. And so I'm about halfway done with the form. I was hoping to get it out before this, but I ran out of time. And so I'm sending it out in the next couple of days. And, basically what I'm looking for is, broad level of commitment, and then level of commitment as far as, weekdays, weekends, once a week, twice a week, if it was safe to play games, would you be ready to do that? Those kinds of things, so we can start to build the foundation. But as I sit here today, I have no idea, other than I feel obligated to figure it out.
Great. No, thank you. That's, it shows what a lot of towns are going to have to do, but, and those that want to put in that time and effort, will hopefully yield some good results. What I'd like to do is kind of real briefly go over some of these points, not go anything in depth, and then that way, I know we have some other questions lined up. We can go back and cover them. A lot of these points we've already talked about, so I won't go into much at all on them. But again, some of these came from the state, some came from U.S. Lacrosse, some came from our insurance provider. And again, these are all guides to make it a safe environment, lower and limit any liability, negligence, but at most provide the safe environment. The number one suggestion, which will be tough, and who this falls upon, is having someone in each program who's that COVID-19 coordinator, who kind of knows what's going on all levels, and obviously not necessarily and hopefully not a coach, but someone who's going to be reading up on all this and kind of knowing what's going on with all these regulations and making sure things are getting done. The number one thing that we told all the town programs is to make sure you contact your local officials. Whatever they say will supersede the state and what we say, as far as, no, you can't use the fields, or, until this time, or only you can't have multiple groups of 10. If whatever they say on the local side will be the superseding rule. The waiver that we're providing, again, someone asked a question on that, but again, that just provides something to all the players, even for coaches, knowing, letting them know what you're doing, and that there is a risk from being out there. Just kind of, again, it's just letting people know that that the town's aware of this and your program's aware of it, but what you guys are doing, and that they understand this. Signage, I saw a question. We'll jump back to that one a little bit later. A little more, Jim can correct me later if I'm wrong on this, a little more of a suggestion. This is going to be challenging. These aren't your fields necessarily. Some of that might fall more on the town itself, if they're going to provide signage on any fields that they're letting people use. The next one, communication, obviously going to be key, and letting, for any town leaders and coaches, letting your parents know what's going on ahead of time, so that they're not thinking it's a normal practice. Whatever rules and regulations, make sure they've agreed and read it beforehand. We all know everyone's still crazy busy, and if you just send something out and assume that everyone's read it, that's where you could run into issues. So making sure that people have acknowledge that they've read whatever rules and regulations for your practices will be very important. The next couple are the common sense ones for the towns and coaches, knowing who your families are, and having that, again, going back to communication. So if someone has been sick or has any signs or symptoms, that they should not attend a practice. If someone in their household's in that high risk population, they should not be attending practices right now. Staying home when appropriate. If someone shows up and they have some symptoms, Jim, one of the things I was somewhat surprised that it didn't have was the temperature testing or taking, at each practice. They do have that for, some of the daycares and summer camps, but not for, youth sports practices. But, that's something you could go above and beyond. And if someone has, or the town wants to purchase one of those, non-touch temperature taker things.
Yeah, I'll jump in really quick. Dave Johns had provided a copy of the Andover town plan for their town rec. They do address a lot of this. They're not taking temps at programs, but they're asking a lot of questions when you come for programs about, are you aware of what what your child is going through, if they have a temperature, and what you have to follow. So the state hasn't
not
been,
only aware, they're asking, and then you're signing an affidavit that says nobody's been in contact, right? So it's bottom line is they're making you commit to, I'm leaving my kid here. I attest that she hasn't had any issues, hasn't had contact. And so, again, Jim, feel free to to share that with everybody. I thought it was, when I saw it, they had that thing ready to go the minute Charlie said we're opening camps. So, I mean, obviously they put a lot of thought into it, and we're ready to go with that. So,
Yep.
Yeah, that was a really comprehensive plan. It was really well put together. There are a lot of towns that have been doing this, folks, who've been meeting every single week or multiple times a week and working with, with the state agency in charge of this. So Andover just had a really nice plan. It's very detailed. There's a lot to follow there, though, but that's for a professional organization that has hired people to do this. You see, it's different. Like Bill pointed out, lots of good points about what we're all just trying to put together here. And there aren't some definite guidelines on some things too, even in the state plan, like signage. It's you coming up with reasonable ways to communicate with some signs. There are not templates for that. There are not direct things. We can be helpful if someone's not sure at all what to put, but it's really just common sense, reasonable things with signage. And we're all starting to see that out there anyway, right? For places that you go in your town.
Yeah, these next sets are still kind of all on that, lines, things we talked about, and having how to organize your, practice and the groupings on the field. One of the biggest things, is getting kids in practice and getting them out, not hanging around. Don't give kids a reason to, be standing around, and that's when they start mingling closer together and, having bags laying next to each other, and can't remember which bag is theirs, and they start shuffling through the wrong stuff. So, keeping all that type of, limiting those opportunities and the common sense things, the face coverings.
Yeah,
Yep.
Go ahead. You want to make rules around that too, and Kevin has a different face coverings. Kids don't have to wear masks in practice. Coaches are supposed to, but I don't think it's been dictated to do that. That is more of a guidance kind of thing. But if a coach uses a cloth mask, it'll be easier to talk through, right? So you have to use common sense with some of these things to follow the rules.
A lot of these having no handshaking, high fives. That's, I think everyone's kind of been along. That's what everyone's been doing. The personal hygiene stuff of keeping, the biggest thing, if kids can come with their equipment and everyone has everything, we're not, I think goalie equipment is the most shared stuff, but, so that's going to be something, unless the older ages, you have specific goalies, and bringing their own equipment on that is not sharing equipment. It's kind of the obvious. Don't open up any food or concession stands. Don't have kids, no brain snacks for everyone, making sure everyone has their own water bottle. Again, some of the stuff, especially on like the water fountains and things, that's going to be a little more on your, on the towns, for those type of things, but, not using public, water fountains, things like that. And then, I just included the officials part because I was on there. Obviously, we're not supposed to be having any games. So there's no reason for officials to be on site from that. So I want to.
Can I jump in for a sec, Kev?
Yep.
I think just something that's important, and it relates to one of the questions. I think, and sorry for typing during that being annoying. I didn't realize it was happening, so I apologize. I know Scott Anderson had asked if we had a template for how to split up the football field, and we don't. But I think it's, again, 20 feet apart. So you have to visualize that yourself. What I picture doing is using different colored cones. Like maybe I just use yellow cones only, that means this is where your group is and where the spacing is of the 20 feet in between groups. I see us using a lot of cones. I would pick your colors. I would order a bunch of colors if you're going to do this right away, and make sure you have plenty of cones. Either that or field paint if you're on grass, right? We all can get, a lot of us have used those in the past. I used to use it for summer chumash, where I would just make creases with field paint, right? You can buy the spray cans, or you can just paint lines. It's really easy to do. So it's just being practical, that kind of way to use cones and or field paint to make circles, boxes, things like that. I'll stop there.
I'll just add a point too. I saw a number of questions about just this, how can you even run a practice with 6 foot apart? And I think there's, it was touched on a little bit, but just to add a few points, I think there's a lot of drills you can do that, I think it actually helps us in some ways force space for the younger kids on the offensive side. So I think, there's, whether it's dodging drills, whether it's, bucket relay drills, et cetera, there's a number of drills that at all ages that we can put together. And I'm sure Dave has a list. And, you know, I'll personally say that if any coach ever wants to reach out to me, yeah, happy to brainstorm ideas because we're all in this together. But I definitely think you can do it. You know, I also think that, you know, from a contact perspective, there's also some things you can do in these first couple weeks, right? It's like you don't have to go full gear. Throw a helmet on and sticks in a glove and go out and work on conditioning, right? You're not going to put the kid in the player in a safety situation if they're you know, if they're not doing that, if they're not wearing their full gear. I mean, again, use your common sense. There's a whole nother set of liability there around safety, but you get my point, right? You can create practices and drills that, you know, don't dwell on those opportunities that could create contact and could create space. But I think you can figure it out. So, you know, I think we've just we've got to be smart. And then one other point I'll say on the equipment side, you know, this is where we really need parents' help. You know, label all your gear, you know, from water bottles to gloves. I mean, by the end of the season, I think I have, you know, 16 left-handed gloves in my truck from, you know, equipment left in the field or whatever. So, you know, please just do the part and, you know, label the water bottles, label the gloves. There's, you know, particularly at the younger ages, everyone buys their starter kits at the same places. So they all have the same looking gear. And, you know, the more you label it, the more it's better for all of us. But I think we can, with common sense, I do think we can get the kids back out there safely.
Bill, I'd actually like to toss one of these questions to get your thoughts on. Someone asked if MBYLL should put out a survey to the masses to kind of see interest on, you know, under these kind of guidelines of coming back and playing. Would that be valuable? Would that be counterproductive? I can see both sides to it, you know.
Is that to me, Kevin? I didn't hear you.
Yes, yeah. For, you know,
I think from a town perspective, I'm not sure. I don't know if that's helpful, quite honestly. I think every town's going to be a little bit different. And I think, you know, an aggregated set of answers isn't necessarily a one size fits all for all programs. You know, again, doing a Google form or a SurveyMonkey is very straightforward. In fact, I'd be happy to send Kevin my survey and he can shoot it around to anybody that may want to use it, you know, alter it as you see fit. I don't claim, you know, any special authorship here, but just trying to do the right thing. So I think it's easy to do at no cost. I think doing it at your own township perspective is better because then you can tune the questions and most importantly, get the feedback from your own program. And with everybody's program having different numbers at different levels, you've got to figure it out, you know, you got to figure it out in your own program.
No, that'd be great if you could share that. I'd love to
Happy to. Yeah,
put that out there. Anything we can do to, you know, we're all in this together and all basically right now trying to do the same thing. So, and that for anyone out there, if your town's doing something or sharing some information that you think could be valuable to others, please get in touch and, you know, we'd be happy to share those things around. Someone had put in there again, going back to some of the liability stuff of, you know, even if you're in the right, that, you know, about being sued and things like that. Again, not to scare people off from youth sports by any means, but I think everyone's so heightened to obviously with coronavirus, but, you know, I think as Bill, you kind of mentioned it earlier a little bit, but hey, we're just in our general liability of being out there and running kids around. I mean, I've unfortunately heard horror stories of, not from around here, of different sports. There was a crazy one of a baseball coach getting sued because he told a kid to slide and the kid got hurt. You know, doing it. Yes, you can, you know, unfortunately these days you can get sued for anything. So, you know, what we're trying to do with all this, and, you know, this person is right. A waiver is not going to stop someone from suing anyone. It's all about, you know, showing what you're doing to do what's right. So.
Can I jump in on a few there, Kev?
Sure.
Real quick, just to tail off of what you're saying. So again, serving on this committee has been helpful to because we've been asking these questions and kind of getting answers from Sean Pierce from the state for some of these things, because there has to be some reasonableness. So if a kid isn't 6 feet apart and you're trying your best, that's not negligence. As long as you're setting the rules and trying to get them to do that as best you can, and you move kids apart when they're together. I mean, it's not negligence if a kid comes within 6 feet of another kid. You just don't want to have open scenes where kids get to stay together, close groups, without masks. The obvious things are the things you have to worry about, not if they're doing drills and they come a little bit close, okay? We'll try to be helpful putting out some drills, but off the top of my head, I've been coaching for so many years. Offensively, I have so many drills I already do that are cone drills where kids move, and I want them to be spaced. I don't want them to be near each other. I want them to be 15 feet to 20 feet apart, all those kinds of things. You can do defensive ones as well. There's many, many drills to do. We'll try to give some suggestions as the weeks move on if people want to do that. I know Jerry had put that in as well. And for Scott, for phase 3, there's nothing that we've done in this committee now for phase 3. And I mean nothing. So any rumors you hear, they're not real. There's going to be a lot of work to do to define what phase 3 is before we go to it. And everything that's critical about it is how does phase 2 go? So I would look at those state numbers every day and see what the trends are. Because if we start to see bumps, it will be pushed out, or we'll go back to phase 1. Anything could happen. So you really want to pay attention to what the governor says in his when he does his presentations. I don't know if he's going to continue with them daily, but probably. We're still in a global pandemic, and so everything's up in the air. But at least now we have a path to some return to play, and we know that some people are dying to get out there. My guess is if you do something,
That's the wrong word to use, Jim.
What's that?
Dying to get out there.
Yeah, we don't want to have people bring it home, but again, there has to be some reasonableness, and we can't stay in our houses forever. And I worry about it, so I'm not coming off as I'm gung ho to go out there. I think towns should really think about this. Should do a lot of planning and communicating to their parents, to their coaches. Have coaches meetings to get it going. Put someone in charge of signage, have someone in charge of the COVID plan, define it, communicate it really well. You have to be detailed about that part of it, and you want to get people in your organization who can help if you're going to take this chance. And if you decide you're not going to, that's okay. We're not promoting you have to get out there. We just know this plan has made it legal to do as of today to follow these guidelines. If you can follow these guidelines, you could have been out there today. And we're not saying go out and do it. We want people to worry about it a bit. We don't want them to be so scared that they feel they can't, but we do want them to worry about it. We do want them to follow those guidelines. And it's why we've spent so much time. Our board has met weekly for many, many weeks now for MBYLL to look at what are we going to do when it's safe to play. And so hence this plan that we put out that has a lot of details to it. So there is a lot to wrap yourself around for this. I'll stop there.
Someone had asked, I think we were talking about masks, and that was a little more, and Jim, maybe you can answer a little better. Yeah, I know you said kids do not have to wear them, especially if they're out there. Coaches, I know that one was a little,
I think that may be a town thing too. I mean, as far as coaches, the town may tell you the coaches need to wear them, but I don't think in the governor's thing. Did it say that the coaches had to have them, but the kids didn't?
No, the coaches do not have to have them.
Okay, and I know it specifically said the kids didn't.
It says should be, not must be.
Should. Yeah. But, and there's a big but here. You said it, Dave. And it's a really good point. You have to see what your town is asking, your board of health. That's where it starts. What is your town? They may dictate these things. So you have to take a look at all of those different things, right? It's the town, it's your local community, it's your state, and then from there it goes on. I will say this, and I'm not. I ordered a couple of these the other days. There's a wife of one of the coaches in Lexington. She has been making masks. They're really kind of cool looking. They're cloth, and they don't look like they're so restrictive that you couldn't talk or do things like that. If I was coaching, I'd probably have one of these cloth masks on. You can get ones that are Bruins ones or different things. If people want that and they respond, we'll find a way to get you that information. But that's a local group that's making those masks, and they're about $15 a piece. That could be really helpful.
There's a questions popped up on balls and should they wash them and disinfect them, and how to do that. That's one that wasn't very clear.
Yeah, I don't think there's any guidance on that. And are balls going to have virus on them? That's doesn't seem likely to me unless it's picking it up in the air somehow. Again, I'm not an expert, but I have a wife who's a nurse, an RN in Boston, who's working with these patients. She's looking at all the latest research and identifications coming out about this disease, and we're still trying to figure it out. There's so much we don't know. But the biggest fear right now is air transmission, not so much on things, even though I'm not saying that couldn't happen. But to have a ball likely carrying a lot of virus, I don't know.
Well, Dave and I talked about this. Dave and I talked about this on the phone, earlier, and kids should not be, picking the balls up with their hands, even with gloves on. That's why they got to stick.
Yes.
If you do some shooting drills, don't let the kids run in and pick them all up. Obviously, that puts a bunch of kids together, but using the hands, it's going to be a lot of ground ball practice.
That's right.
Ball should never be on the ground. It should be in the sticks constantly, shouldn't it?
Yeah.
That's what we're working to get to. This
Josh,
is the opportunity to get these kids some of the opportunity.
Yeah. If someone wants to wash the balls, throw it in a bucket with some bleach solution. I'm sure there's something online that tells you how much bleach to use to kill this virus. You could do that. It's not a big deal, I don't think. And I see someone down here at PLL selling masks, so that's great. Thanks for doing that, Josh.
There's some cool lacrosse masks out there now.
Good.
Here's another mask question. Kevin Nemsick, no, players do not have to wear a mask per the state. But yeah, if your town says, if you want to do anything on our field, everyone has to wear a mask, then everyone's got to wear a mask. But if they don't, because again, the goal or, structure is not to have the kids in contact or standing close together, that they should be 6 feet apart, then they do not need to be wearing a mask.
That's correct. This is a direct question on the state committee, that we had as well, because it's just unreasonable for kids to be running, exercising with a mask on. That might not be safe either, for breathing. So no, they do not have to wear a mask, but coaches in instruction are recommended to wear a mask doing instruction.
Great.
I don't know if a local town would make a rule, but that's something you'd have to take up with the town. That seems a little much.
Yep. All right. Well, that covered all the questions we have right now. I'm sure there's going to be others that pop up from people. Anyone who registered for this webinar, you should, in the confirmation, my email is on there. So feel free to, shoot questions our way. We're going to try to aggregate some of this. We're going to share this information, but, if we start to get a lot of common questions, we'll share it. We'll decide, if we need to do, another webinar with some, different leaders to kind of talk about what's going on and challenges or what people are doing successfully. That's what we always want to do, bring people together, share our success stories, what's working, what's not working, so no one, has to reinvent the wheel or do something that's already been challenging somewhere else. So we'll continue to do that as well. Just want to make sure. Yep. So with that, want to thank everyone for joining us. Thank you, Jim, Bill, Dave, for hopping on and answering the questions. Again, we'll continue to provide info as we get it, as we, look towards, what's going on now. If there is, when we get to the point of another phase and different rules and regulations, we'll do our best to aggregate that info and share that out again as soon as possible. But please reach out if there's any questions. We want to be a resource, for everyone, to hopefully, at some point, whenever everyone feels the most comfortable, get back out there safely to play some lacrosse. So thank you everyone for joining us, and have a good night, and stay safe.
See you guys.
Everybody.
Thank you.